All right, Shabbos, say good morning. Good morning. Let us begin. Beginning by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. Sure to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Menachem Av, Benjamin and Elise Wall of Eretz Yisrael, for dedicating all the Sherman Drushos this month in honor of Moshe Ibnson and Jeremy Lassen for all they do for making our Shiurim available for those beyond the physical confines of our base measures. To thank Jack Bennett for dedicating all the Sherman Drushos this month in memory of Sergeant Nikolai Rappaport of the Givati Brigade, who died in a Hezbollah ambush in southern Lebanon in February 1998. And to thank our Week of Learning sponsors, Nathan and Beth Adler, in memory of and in honor of Nathan's father, of Nathan's father, Hachavar Baruch Mordechai ben Morenu Rav Nassan. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshama Slav and Aliyah and the families in Nechama. So with that, let us begin. A lot to do today. Today's daf is Pei Zayin 87. We are picking up Emeretz Hashem on Pei Vav Amud Beis 86b, about 18 lines up from the bottom. So the Gemara says as follows: V'chein Amar Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Chanina Amar Reish Lakish Halacha Rabbi Lazar Begittin. Both says, remember again, we were reintroduced. We haven't seen Rabbi Lazar for a little while in the Masechta. Rabbi Lazar is the opinion that holds Eidei Mesira Karsi, that ultimately again it is the witnesses who witness the giving over of the get, who ultimately again create the effectiveness of the get. So now the Gemara is weighing in on this and saying that halacha l'maisa, we pass like Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Yochanan Rafil Rech get Einbo Salimar. Oh, so actually I think we might. No, good. So Shalach le Rabbi Abba sorry. Shalach le Rabbi Abba Bar Zavda Lemari Bar Mar. Boy Meim Rafuna halacha Rabbi Lazar by Gittin or ein halacha. So does halacha for Rabbi Lazar by Gittin or not? Adahachi, while this question was asked before it was answered, Nach Nafshe Rafuna. Rafuna passed away. Amrle Rabba Berei, Hachi Amra Abba, this is what my father said, Mishmei the Rabba, Halacha Rabbi Lazar Begittin. The halacha of Rabbi Lazar, Eidei Mesira Karsi, for Rabbi Sena became B'dvar Halacha Mishra Rabbeinu Amru, and the rabbis who are experts in matters of halacha said in the name of Rabbeinu, Rabbi Yudan, Amar Halacha Rabbi Lazar Begittin. The halacha of Rabbi Lazar Begittin. Then Rav Chaim Bar Gurya Amarav Halacha Rabbi Lazar Begittin. Okay, so we'll say, so seems to be consensus opinion now is forming around or circling around Rabbi Lazar that the halacha is Eidei Mesira Karsi. So Ikadami, alternate version of this, says V'chavrina became Dvar Halacha, our friends who are experts in halacha, V'talmidei Rabbeinu Mishum Rabbeinu Amru Halacha Rabbi Lazar Begittin. Dam Rav Chisda Am Rav Chama Bar Gurya Amarav Halacha Rabbi Lazar Begittin. V'chein Ki Asa Rabin Am Rabbi Lazar Amarav Halacha Rabbi Elazar Begittin. So the takeaway message over here, right, is that the halacha follows Rabbi Elazar by Gittin, and this is in fact how the Rambam paskins. The Rambam paskins that by Gittin, the Iker Eidim, the primary witnesses which create the effectiveness of the get, are the Eidei Mesira, are the witnesses who actually witness the actual giving over of the get from husband to wife. Now, that being said, even though we hold Eidei Mesira Karsi, nevertheless, remember, we always have witnesses who sign on the get as well. Why? Remember again, that goes back, Mipnei Tikkun Ha'olam, for the benefit of society. What's the benefit to society? Because remember again, what happens if you can't get hold of the Eidei Mesira, right? What happens if the Eidei Mesira die? What happens if they get now or someone is overseas? So remember again, as much as we say that it's the Eidei Mesira who create the effectiveness of the get, it is the Eidei Chasima who sign on the get, who allowed this get to be legitimized and upheld should it be contested sometime later on. And even if you can't find the Eidei Mesira, the get itself is validated from within the document itself. Incredible. Mishnah. Shnaim sheshalchu shnei Gittin shavin. Interesting case here. Let's say, imagine for a moment you have two couples with the same names, right? Two Ruvains married to two Rachels. So what happens? Then is arvu, and now so you have two identical Gittin, right? Ruvain to Rachel, and again, let's assume everything is the same. So they live in the same locations, same names, getting divorced on the same day. So there are two Gittin that exist, to two Ruvain divorcing Rachels. What happened? V'nisarvu. The Gittin get mixed up, and to make things more complicated. So we'll say, remember again, this is talking about a case where now the Gittin had been written, right? So let's even assume for a moment, same sofer, right? So the Gittin had been written. So two Gittin exist. So Rabbi says, so what do you do? Now the Gittin had been mixed up. Now remember again, a get has to be written l'shma. So what do you do in each of these situations? No saying shneim lazu u'shneim lazu. It's actually an interesting idea. You give both Gittin to Rachel 1 and both Gittin to Rachel 2. In other words, give both documents to both women. This way ensuring that each woman received the get that is hers. Lefichach, avad echad mehen. Therefore, again, if one of the documents is lost, hari hasheni batal. So obviously, if you lose one of the documents, the problem is this whole process doesn't work, right? So technically speaking, they could both get divorced as long as they're both able to be in receipt of both documents. Chamisha shekasvu klal b'socha get. So another interesting case of say, if you have 5 people, 5 men who are all divorcing their wives, not the same names, right? Group of friends, they do everything together, right? So Lamaisa now, they are divorcing their wives together. So they decide, you know what, let's get a group rate, and they decide, why go ahead, right? These are conservationist guys, terrible husbands, right? But very concerned about the environment. So they only want to write, you want to use one piece of parchment. Let's just use one document to put everything in it. So Chamisha shekasvu klal b'socha get. So you have 5 people who wrote together within a get. Ish ploni, megarish plonis, uploni plonis. So imagine the following situation. It has a list of names. Reuven is divorcing Rachel, and Shimon is divorcing Leah, and Levi is divorcing Bela, and they keep going, right? They list all the names. Va'idim milamata, and ultimately the witness is signed on the bottom of this document. Kulam ksherim. Ultimately, again, so it works. Well, we'll see the parameters in which it works. And that document, again, remember, there's only one document. So obviously, now the Mishnah says the get could be effective. So what happens now? You have to give that document to each woman. Because remember, again, there's only one get. So you give it to woman number 1. She receives it, gives it back. Right? Because remember, again, I'll say, a woman doesn't have to hold on to her get. Right? The idea is she has to receive it, be able to guard it, but technically speaking, she doesn't have to go ahead and keep it. Now, again, it's a good idea for her to keep it, just to have a record of what occurred. So what's happening over here is you're divorcing each of these women with the same document. However, again, if there is a separate tofes written for each of these women, va'edim milamata, and the witness is signed on the bottom, as sha'idim nikran imo kosher, only the bottom one, which the edim are attached to, are going to be kosher. So okay, so we'll have to see exactly what that means if there's a tofes that is written for each of them. But somehow, again, so we'll say, it seems to be what the Mishnah is saying over here is, if all of them, right, if the get for each of them are kind of combined together, and the edim sign on the bottom, technically speaking, that works. If, however, halacha l'maisa, the Gittin are separate and distinct within that one document, only the bottom one, to which the signatures of the witnesses are close to, only that one is kosher, the rest are not. We'll see the parameters of this in the Gemara. Gemara, Mantana, who is the opinion? Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, Delo Rabbi Lazar, Di Rabbi Lazar, Keva Namar Edim Mesira Karsi, Ha Lo Yodi Bahai Minayo Kamagarsha. So let's remember again, we're referencing now the first case in the Mishnah. First case in the Mishnah is you have two identical Gittin, right? 2 Reuvens divorcing their wives, Rachel. The Gittin get mixed up, so the Mishnah said, no problem. Just go ahead and give both documents to both women, and we know for sure everybody's getting the get that they need to receive. The Gemara says, this clearly does not reflect the view of Rabbi Elazar, Edim Mesir Karshi, like we just established in the Gemara. Right? Why? Because according to Rabbi Elazar, it would seem to be that the witnesses who are seeing the get being given over have to know which get is affecting divorce. So the Gemara said, "By Amar Afil Tim Rabbi Lazar, Eimud by Rabbi Lazar, Ksiva Lishma, Ksiva Lishma Bibai." We'll say it could even be Rabbi Lazar. In other words, remember again, Rabbi Lazar's model of Edi Mesira Karsi. So we'll say, remember again, what he requires is that the writing of the get has to be Lishma. The giving over of the get need not be Lishma. So therefore, again, we know that in this case you have 2 Gittin that were in fact written Lishma. What's my problem? I don't know which is which. So again, they're both written. In other words, there's not a problem with the actual writing of the get. The writing of the get we feel is effective. I just don't know whose is whose. So again, even according to Balazar holds Eti Mesira Karsi, both witnesses will witness, or I should say the witnesses will witness both Gittin being given over, we know that one of those Gittin is the correct Lishma get for each of the women, and Shalom Yisrael. Incredible. Chamisha Shakasvu Klal. So the Gemara says, Hechi Dami Klal, Hechi Dami Tofes. So we'll say, so the Mishnah says essentially like this: if you have 5 men writing their Gittin within one piece of parchment, if they write it what's called klal, right, all together, right, then aloha lamaisa, it works. If they write it tofes, Rabbi say, seems to sound like individualized gittin within that one piece of parchment, it's not good. So the Gemara says, explain to me the case of klal, explain to me the case of tofes. So what's an interesting machlokes? Rabbi Yochanan Amar, zman echad lekulan, zeu klal. If there's one date, in other words, one date on the top of the get, one zman, then ultimately that's called klal. That's clear. Let's be clear. What's driving this? In other words, what are we looking for? In other words, in order for this joint get, right, to be valid, what do I need? So what I need the signatures of the witnesses on the bottom to somehow be attached to all of the names, all of the couples above. That's what I need. That's what I'm driving at over here. Because otherwise, if the witnesses are just attached to the bottom one, so in other words, let's work backwards. Clearly, I will say which one will be a valid get. Which one will be a valid get? The bottom one, right? Why? Because that's the one that has the witnesses right under it, right? But Pashtus, that's going to work. So let's assume we have 5 guys over here. So get number 5, the bottom get, pretty much is going to be good. The shaila is going to be on the previous 4. So how do we go ahead and create a document where the bottom signatures of the witnesses are attached to all of the gittin listed above? So that's what's called klal. Klal means they're all grouped together so that the signatures on the bottom work for everything above it. So what's the definition of klal? Rabbi Yochanan says zman echad, one date. One date, when you have one date at the top of that document, I will say, and not individual dates before the names of each of the couples, that indicates that what? This is one joint document. The witnesses that sign on the bottom ultimately are signing on everything above it. So the Gemara said, "Klal zman l'chol ve'echad zeu tofes." If I will say, imagine for a moment you have a date, then Reuven and Rachel. Another date, Shimon and Leah. A third date, Levi and Bela. So now you have a date before each couple. That, Rabbi Yochanan says, individualizes the Gittin. Once the Gittin are individualized, then you can't say that the signatures of the witnesses on the bottom are attached to all the previous Gittin. Reish Lakish says, well, top of Pei Zayin. No, afilu zman echad l'kulan nami havi toves. So Reish Lakish says there's nothing to do with the date, right? Even one date still is a case of tofes, individualized gittin. So Elahechi dami klal. So what's the case of klal? Here we go. The case of anu ploni uploni gerashnu nishosenu plonis uplonis. So that both is very interesting. Reish Lakish says, what's the case of klal? The case of klal is like this: we, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, have divorced our wives, Rachel, Leah, Bela, and Rivka. That's klal. That's klal. And I will say, that's everyone. So if you notice in this case, what's happening over here, according to Reish Lakish, it's all written together. It's all written together. So as such, when you write it like that, and then you have the signatures of the witnesses on the bottom, so that's clear that those signatures are going on what? Going on what? All of the names and all of the gittin above it. Incredible. Maskiv Rabbi Abba, Rabbi Yochanan. So Rabbi Abba is Kash Rabbi Yochanan. So I'll say, so again, so Rabbi Yochanan telling us, klal, right? How do you make all of these grouped? Remember, I'll say, our goal is klal. In general, our goal is to be a klal, right? Over here, again, our goal, right? The case that works over here is when everything is viewed as one cohesive unit. How do you create klal? According to Reish Lakish, one date. According to Rabbi Yochanan, by listing the names all together. We, names of husbands, are divorcing our wives, names of wives. That's klal. So Maskef Rabbi Yochanan, so Rabbi Amr is Kash Rabbi Yochanan, Tamar Zman Echal Kulan Zeu klal. So Rabbi Yochanan, you said one date makes it a klal. I lechosh dilma ki chas musadia basruhu dechasimi. I don't understand. Still, even if you have one date, Rabbi Yochanan, okay, so you have one date, that's very nice. But Lamaisa, when the witnesses sign on the bottom, why don't we normally assume that when witnesses sign on the bottom of something, we'll say, what they're really only signing on is the get that's on the bottom. We'll say, in Rabbi Yochanan's model, remember, what do you have? He's saying all you need is one date. But how is the document arranged? The document is arranged essentially as 5 independent Gittin listed one after the other. So when the witnesses sign on the bottom of that document, why don't we just assume that they're signing on the bottom get? Why would you assume that they're signing on everything above it? After all, Milotai, did we not learn? Is interesting case. Edim chasumin al she'ilas shalom beget pasal, chayshina shema al she'ilas shalom chasmo. So it's an interesting case. Imagine the following situation, right? Ruvain is divorcing his wife Rachel. So what does he do? He commissions a get, right? He wants to give the get to the witnesses to deliver to his soon-to-be ex-wife. And in the document itself, it also says, by the way, when you're going to deliver this get to Rachel, so Rachel's in Pikesville, go ahead. I haven't seen my friend Shimon in a very long time. Please send him my best. Right? And Reuven writes that in the. He's a sensitive guy, right? And so Reuven writes this in the document. He actually writes it in the get, and the witnesses sign on that. So the Gemara says, we learned in the Raisa, it's an invalid get. Why is it an invalid get? Because we're concerned that when the witnesses sign their names, what are they signing to? They're agreeing to deliver Shalom Aleichem to Shimon. That's what they're agreeing to. And I will say the logic behind that is because when you have something additional inserted in a get before the signature, or in a document before the signatures of the witnesses, the concern is that maybe the signature is going on that last item and not on the body, and not on the previous body of the document. So too over here, when you have 5 Gittin listed, very nice, Rabbi Yochanan, that you have one date, but why not assume that Lamaisa, the signatures of the witnesses are on the last get and not the previous ones? So Lav Itmar Allah Rabbi Avo L'Didim Mefarshim Minei Rabbi Yochanan Sha'alu Pasal Visha'alu Kasher. So Rabbi say, even in the case of the greeting, when is it problematic? It would probably be problematic if you write the body of the get and then you say Sha'alu, inquire about the welfare of my friend Shimon. That's Pasal. But if you write Visha'alu, you put in the vav. So Rabbi say again, that vav is a connector. So what does Visha'alu mean? And inquire. What does and inquire mean? And inquire means, in addition to that which you are executing above, also go ahead and do this. So Rabbi say that's going to be valid. Hachanami tichsiv bei ploni uploni uploni. So Rabbi say, according to Rabbi Yochanan, the way this klal get is written is as follows. It says one date, so first of all, Zman Echad, one date, and then the way the Gittin are arranged is, Ruvain is divorcing Rachel, and Shimon is divorcing Leah, and Levi is divorcing Bela, and Yehuda is divorcing Rivka. So the Vav is by each of the names. That Vav, that connection Vav, ultimately is linking all of the independent Gittin in this document to be one cohesive get unit, so that when the witnesses sign on the bottom, they're signing on everything above. Incredible. V'su, Rabbi Yochanan Damar Zman L'Cholechar Ve'echad. Zeo Tofes, according to Rabbi Yochanan, who holds that when there's an independent date before each of the individual Gittin, that's a Tofes case. That's an individualized get case. My area mishum Tofes. What are we about Tofes? But say, don't you have a different problem, right? Which is ultimately, again, the assumption is that the date is not going to be reflective of the actual execution of the document, right? So Lamai said, don't we have to be concerned about a case of a get being written by day and ultimately not being signed at night? And I was about to say, if you're going ahead, imagine get number 1, you're dating on the 24th of Av. Okay, but now you're writing a whole bunch of Gittin. So by the time you go ahead and you sign that get, it's possible that's what? That it's going to be the 25th of Av. And I will say that's a problem. That's going to be a case of nechtav bayom and nechtav balayla. We learned this before, that when you write a get by day, sign it by night, it's a big problem because the date is not actually reflective of the actual date on which the get was executed. That can have a variety of different problems. No, the case we're talking about where, again, the sofer is a proficient sofer, and therefore the date written in the get itself, halach l'maisa, reflects the actual execution of the divorce. Incredible. So I will say, so this is now all in the position of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan holds the klal case is one date. The Tofes case is multiple dates. Fine. Says the Gemara, Amali Ravina Ravashi, Ravina said to Ravashi, the Rish Lakish Damar Zman Echad L'Kulanami Tofes Avi. According to Rish Lakish, who holds, Rish Lakish is not really concerned about the date. He holds that halacha l'maisi, even one date is considered to be a Tofes case. The Heichi Dami Klal. So according to Rish Lakish, what's the Klal case? What's the case where all of the Gittin are considered to be one cohesive get unit? Dichsid Behachi says the following: Anu Ploni uploni. Gerashno nishosenu plonis uplonis. So I will say, so again, remember, according to Reish Lakish, the klal case is where the get literally reads, we, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, have divorced our wives, or are divorcing our wives. Rachel, Leah, Bela, Rivka. So the Gemara says there's a problem with that. Nimtzu, shtei nashim iskarshos beget echad. I will say, aren't you running into a problem ultimately, again, of two women being divorced with the same get? With the same get. So the Gemara says, Vatorah Amra, v'kasav la, v'lo la ulachaverta. The Torah says when giving a get, the kasav la has to be written for an individual woman, not to her and her friend. Not to her and her friend. And I will say, I just want to point out, isn't this a problem with all of these cases? So no, here's the difference. I will say, in Rabbi Yochanan's model, really what you have is you actually have like a separate get written for each couple. They just happen to be on the same document. So that is considered to be separate Gittin. In other words, from a halachic perspective, that satisfies the criteria of separate Gittin. According to Reish Lakish, in order for this get to be effective, you have to mix all of the couples together, right? It's Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda are divorcing their wives, Rachel, Leah, Bela, and Rivka. So when you're mixing everyone together, that's one get. So you're divorcing multiple women with one document, and it doesn't work. To which the Gemara said, well, say first wide line, Peizayin Amudalf 87a, first wide line, the other cause of Ploni Girish Plonis, Uploni Girish Plonis. So I will say, what's the case? It's actually interesting. The case over here is after writing all of the names together, then what do? Then you break them up. So I will say it's actually interesting. So in Rish Lakish's model, what you're going to have is like this. You're going to have, first it's going to say, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda are divorcing their wives, Rachel, Leah, Bela, and Rivka, right? And again, what that does is that creates a get cohesion so that the witnesses who sign on the bottom are signing on everything above it. Then after that, then you write each couple individually. So once you write each couple individually, then ultimately, again, it's considered to be a separate get for each woman. Incredible, fascinating. So I'm going to Ravashi. Why is this different from the following case? Why is this different than the case where we'll say if a person writes all of his property to two of his servants? Right? So in other words, we'll say, imagine for a moment, so right, Reuben has two servants. He writes all of his property to both servants. So what's the halacha? Kanu, they acquire themselves, right? And they're able to emancipate. They're able to emancipate one another. So the Gemara says, "V'lavo kimna b'shtei shtaros." We set up that case, so I'll say ultimately as a case of dealing with two shtaros. Tanya kavasei Rabbi Yochanan, Tanya kavasei Reish Lakish. So we'll say we have a brisa that supports Rabbi Yochanan, that supports Reish Lakish. So we'll say, so again, pause here for just a moment. So we're still left with our fundamental machlokes. Here's what our Mishnah. Let's just follow the train of thought over here. Here's what our Mishnah tells us. There is a model of 5 men divorcing their 5 wives and using one document, right? And now, when we say divorcing one document, really what we're focusing on is, and using one set of signatures of witnesses. One set of signatures of witnesses. Okay, how does it work? So the Mishnah says, if it's klal, everyone's together, it works. If it's tofes, individualized, it doesn't work. What's the definition of klal, definition of tofes? Machlokes Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan says, klal, one date. One date at the top, that brings everyone together, therefore the signatures on the bottom will work for everyone. Multiple dates, that's called tofes, individualized. The signatures on the bottom will only work for the bottommost get. Reish Lakish, no. Reish Lakish says, nothing to do with date. Reish Lakish says at the end of the day, klal is all how you write it. If you first write it, we, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, are divorcing our wives, Rachel, Leah, Bela, Rivka, right? And then, as you just saw in the Gemara, then afterwards, each couple is broken out. That's called klal. That's called klal. Write it just from the beginning as separate couples. Ultimately, again, that's going to be tofes, and the signatures will only work for the bottommost get. Incredible. So I'll say now we're going to see a brisa that supports both of these opinions. So here we go. So the brisa that supports Rabbi Yochanan, we'll say Pei Zayin with Aleph, 87a, 4 lines down into the wide lines. Tanya Kavasi Rabbi Yochanan. A brisa that supports Rabbi Yochanan. Chamisha shekasvu b'socha get. If 5 men write one get together, and what do they write? Ish ploni megarish plonis, uploni plonis, uploni plonis. Right, so again, 5 men going ahead, right? This man divorced his wife, this man divorced his wife, this man, right? Vizman echal kulan, and one date in the document. Va'idim milamato, and the witness is signed at the bottom of this document. Kulan ksherim. Ultimately, again, all the Gittin are effective. V'tinosim l'chol achos v'achos. And ultimately, again, the get obviously has to be given to each woman individually. Zman l'chol echad v'echad. However, again, if you have a different date for each get, va'idim milamata, and the witnesses are signed at the bottom. Es sha'idim nikraim imo kasher. Only the bottom get, which has the signatures of the witnesses attached to it, is going to be an effective get. Okay. Rabbi Yehuda ben Meser says, Em yesh revach beineihem pasal. So it's interesting. Another shita. Rabbi Yehuda ben Meser says, if there's a space in between the gittin, ultimately again it will be pasal. Ve'im lav kosher. But if not, if there's no space, ultimately, again, all the gittin will be effective. She'ein zman mafsikan. For the date, zman, a separate date, does not divide up the gittin. So Rabbi Yehuda ben Meseira arguing on Rabbi Yochanan. Fine. So we'll say, but that's primarily the brisa that supports Rabbi Yochanan. Fine. Tanya Kavasi de Reish Lakish, a brisa that supports Reish Lakish. Chamisha shekasvu klal b'socha get. If 5 men are using one document to divorce their wives and they write it in a joint fashion, anu ploni uploni, geirashnu in the show say nu plonis uplonis. Right, and they write. So how do they write the get? We, the husbands, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, are divorcing our wives. Rachel, Leah, Bela, and Rivka, and then afterwards in the get it says Ploni, Girish, Plonis. Then I will say under that it says Reuven is divorcing Rachel, right? Ploni, Girish, Plonis. Shimon is divorcing Leah, and then so that's what we just saw before, right? So first everyone is mentioned together, husbands and then wives. Then afterwards again each couple is mentioned specifically. Uzman echal kulan, and there's only one date. Va'idim milamata, and the witness is signed at the bottom. Kulan ksherim. All of these gittin are kosher, v'tinos in l'chol achas v'achas, and which obviously you have to give it to each of the individual women. Zman l'chol echad v'echad, if there's an individual date for each get, right? V'revach l'chol echad v'echad, and a space in between each of the gittin. Va'idim milamata, and the witnesses are signed on the bottom. Es sha'idim nikro imo kosher. Right? Only the bottom get ultimately is going to be kosher. Rabbi Meir says, Afapi she'in ravach b'nei pasal shazman mafsikon. Rabbi Meir says, even if there is no space in between the gittin, if there's a separate zman, if there's a separate date, ultimately, again, that divides up the gittin. Remember, again, anytime whenever we talk about dividing up the gittin, that means the signatures of the witnesses are not going to apply to all the ones above. So I'll say, good. So that halacha l'maisa, the Gemara says, are the two brises. So both Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish both have a brisa which supports their respective positions. Reish Lakish, my area zman l'chol echad ve'echad. Reish Lakish again, ultimately again, why are you bringing up a separate zman? Ha'amar zman echad l'kulan nami tofes havi. Again, I will say, in Reish Lakish's view, the date is irrelevant. Let me clarify that. Date, of course, is relevant. You need a zman and a get. According to Reish Lakish, whether or not there's one date or multiple dates is not the determining factor as to whether or not something is klal or something is tofes. So why is that even being mentioned over here? To which the Gemara says, Hanimili, hechadolo arvinhu meikara. That's only true if you did not combine all of the names. Also remember again, in Reish Lakish's model, the ideal way to write the get is all of the husband's names, divorcing all of the wives' names. Avahacha, the arvinu meikara, but over here, ultimately again, where you combined everyone in the beginning, ipalig luhu zman in, if ultimately again, the zman is there to divide it, yes. Ilo, lo, and if not, not. So I will say good. So bottom line, all right. So now we've seen ultimately again the positions are Yochanan and Reish Lakish. So how do we paskin? How do we paskin? I will say. So again, remember, one more time. So we are left with the fundamental machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, how to define the cases of klal, how to define the case of toves. Remember, from our Mishnah, multiple people utilizing the same document to divorce their individual wives ultimately could work as long as it's written in klal form. Won't work if it's written in tofes form. Here's what I know. Klal means everything is cohesive and together. Tofes means everything is individualized. Right? Remember, what is our goal? Our goal is that the signatures of the witnesses below should be attached to all of the previously written gittin. What's the definition of klal? What's the definition of tofes? So again, Rabbi Yochanan, definition of klal, one date. One date. That date makes everything below it into one cohesive unit. Ultimately, signatures of the witnesses on the bottom attach themselves to all the previous gittin. Individual dates, that's tofes. Reish Lakish, no, nothing to do with dates. All about how you write the get. Individual gittin, Reuven divorces Rachel, Shimon divorces Leah, Levi divorces Bela. If that's the way it's written, that's tofes. Signatures of witnesses will only work for the bottom get, not for the previous ones. You combine everything, Reuven, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda are divorcing their respective wives, and then you individualize each couple, signatures on the bottom, that's a klal get that works. How do we paskin? So both say that Rambam paskins is actually, I mean, I don't know if it's a Lamaisa case, but the Rambam paskins, he says in Hilchos Gerushin, Parak Dalet Halacha Yudches, Chamisha Shekasvu get Echad LaChamish Neshosein. 5 men are utilizing one document to divorce their 5 wives. In kasvu beklal, kigon shekasvu bekach b'shabes gerish ploni leplonis, uploni leplonis, v'chein amar kol echad mehen leishto, lechi di tehevyon v'chol tofes aget u'shnei edim chosmi lemata, hare ze get kasher, v'inasi l'chol achaz v'achaz mehem edim esira. So Rabbi say, so halacha l'maisa, the Rambam seems to paskin like Reish Lakish, and he says the lashon over here is girish ploni leplonis, uploni leplonis. So I will say the Rambam has a little bit of a hybrid model. What's his hybrid model? See, he doesn't hold. You don't need. You don't need grouping. In other words, remember in Reish Lakish's pure model, what you needed was Reuven, Shimon, Levi, and Yehuda are divorcing their wives, Rachel, Leah, Bela, and the Rivka. And then underneath that, you need Reuven is divorcing Rachel, Shimon's divorced. The Rambam says you don't need that. Rabbi is a modified version. Rambam says what you need is, all right, on so-and-so date, Reuven is divorcing Rachel, and Shimon is divorcing Leah, and Levi is divorcing. So we'll say it's that vav that we saw before. So it's essentially adopting Reish Lakish, that everyone has to be written together, but you don't need husbands and then wives. You just need each couple listed, but what you need is that connector vav. You need that connector vav linking each of the couples, because that makes it clear that then the signatures of the witnesses below are in fact going on all of the couples, all of the gittin above. Good. That's the psak of the Rambam. Incredible. All right, so let's go weiter. Says the Mishnah. Okay, so we'll say, so let's go weiter. So I will say, by the way, just, okay, so Michael Terniansky wrote on Zoom, okay, did I miss how this get is conveyed? Just to reiterate, how is this get conveyed? Remember again, I will say, so this is, still going to Rabbi Lazar, right? Eidei Mesira Karsi. Remember, in order for a get to be effective, halacha l'maaseh, you have to give it over in front of witnesses. So remember again, I will say, how is this get conveyed? Remember, Reuven is going to take it first, he's going to give it to Rachel. What is Rachel going to do with it after she receives it? What is she going to do with it? She's going to give it back. She's going to give it back. Then Shimon's going to take it, and Shimon's going to give it to Leah, and this is going to repeat itself multiple times. Incredible. Mishnah, Shnei Gittin, Shekasu Zebet Sad Zez was another interesting case. What happens if you have two Gittin written one next to the other? So also imagine for a moment we have one piece of parchment, as opposed to the previous case where multiple couples were divorcing, utilizing the same document. Here, Reuven is divorcing Rachel, Shimon is divorcing Leah. 2 independent couples. They just happen to both be writing their gittin, their independent gittin on one piece of parchment. So Shnei Gittin, Shekason Zeh B'Tzad Zeh, Ushnayim Eidim Ivrim. Ba'im mitachas lazeh, letachas lazeh, u'shnayim eidim yevanim, ba'im mitachas lazeh, letachas lazeh. All right, so this is actually really interesting. So let's just a moment. So the halacha is, what do we mean Greek witnesses versus Hebrew witnesses? These are obviously all Jewish witnesses. The way that people in Eretz Yisrael would sign their names is the way that we sign our Hebrew names, which is name, Ben, your father's name. The way that the Greek Jews used to sign their names, interestingly enough, was their father's name first and then their name afterwards. Their name afterwards. That's the way they signed. Shabbos says, interestingly enough, what you have over here is as follows. Imagine for a moment you have two Gittins side by side. You have 4 witnesses in total. The first 2 witnesses under the Gittin, so the way it's working over here, Rashi has a little bit of an image of this as well, right? The way this is working over here is the signatures of the witnesses span the entire area beneath the 2 Gittin, right? So the Gittin are in side by side. So if you can imagine, so you have 4 signatures beneath the Gittin. The first 2 signatures are what we'll call Hebrew signatures. Hebrew signatures, right? Those signatures 1 and 2. Signatures 3 and 4 are then going to be what we'll call the Greek signatures, which halacha l'maisa again just means father's name first, son's name second. So shnei gin shekasvan zeh b'tzad zeh u'shnayim edim ivrim ba'im mitachas lazeh l'tachas zeh u'shnayim edim yevanim ba'im mitachas zeh l'tachas zeh. So I'll say, so essentially you have 4 signatures of witnesses that are spanning underneath the get. So what's the halacha? Es sha'idim harishonim nikraim imo kasher. So we'll say, so remember again, so really the get which has signatures of witnesses attached to it, which Rabbi say essentially is going to be the right get. So remember you have 2 Gittins side by side. The right get is going to be the get ultimately again that has signatures of witnesses right underneath it. The first 2 signatures, which are the Hebrew signatures, that's going to be the valid get. As sha'idim harishon mikram imo kasher, eid echad ivri ve'eid echad yivani, ve'eid echad ivri ve'eid echad yivani, by mitachas zela zesh neim psulim. Rabbi say, so in case number 1, you have 2 Hebrew signatures, 2 Greek signatures. Again, Rabbi say, just again, you understand, everything's being written in Hebrew. The Hebrew versus Greek represents the style in which they would sign. So in case number 1, 2 side-by-side Gittin, 2 Hebrew signatures, 2 Greek signatures. We're both saying in that case, which get is going to be kosher? Only the right get. When looking at document, the right get. Why the right get? Because that's the get that has the 2 signatures right underneath it. The left get is going to be puzzle because it doesn't have 2 signatures right underneath it. Again, we'll challenge that in just a moment. Case number 2, I will say, is you have Hebrew signature, Greek signature, Hebrew signature, Greek signature. The Gemara says Mishnah says in that case, both Gittin are puzzle. Both Gittin are puzzle. Why? Emeretz Hashem will see in the Gemara. Says the Gemara, I v'liskasha hai beruvein v'hai ben Yaakov v'hai ben Yaakov. So we'll say, I don't understand. But Allah l'maisa, why can't both Gittin? Why can't both Gittin be kosher? In other words, Rabbi say, so l'maisa again, going back to the first case, we have 2 Hebrew signatures, two Greek signatures. Why can't the first get, right, the right get, be kosher, ultimately again, through the 2 Hebrew signatures around underneath it, which it is, and why can't the second get, the left-hand get, be kosher with the Greek signatures on the bottom? Because most remember again, think about this just a moment. For the Greek get, I will say, which names are going to be underneath it? Technically, which names are underneath it? The first names of the witnesses. Because remember again, the way you sign in Greek, so to speak, is father's name and then the son's name, which means the father's name are on the right side, the son's names are on the left side, which essentially means the son's names are, meaning the witnesses' names are underneath the left side get. Again, you hear how that works? So again, I both say, so on the right, so remember, case number 1 of the Mishnah, where you have 2 Hebrew witnesses, 2 Greek witnesses, right side get will be kosher because it's right attached to the 2 Hebrew witnesses. The Mishnah said left side get is puzzle. Why should left side get be puzzle? Left side get actually has the 2 names of the witnesses actually right underneath it. Right? I mean, not directly underneath it. There's a space, but it's right directly underneath the signatures of the 2 Hebrew witnesses. Let it be kosher, ultimately, because again, remember again, the way you would normally, let's say for a moment, in Greek, if you're Reuven ben Yaakov, right, the way you would sign that get would be Yaakov ben Reuven Eid. right? Yaakov ben Ruvain Eid, right? That's how you would sign. Right, I'm sorry. You would sign it Ruvain ben Yaakov. One more time. If your name is Ruvain and you're the son of Yaakov, the way you would sign that document again would be Yaakov ben Ruvain Eid. So I will say, right, father's name first and son's name second. That's how it works in Greek. So I will say what that means is now on the left-hand side get, you have Ruvain Eid on the bottom. Well, Ruvain Eid is actually an effective signature. That should validate the left-hand side get. After all, the Gemara says, Dahatnan ish ploni eid kasher. If you sign a document, I will say, without your father's name, and you just sign your name eid, technically speaking, that's kasher. Delo kasav eid. The Gemara answers where he didn't write eid. He didn't write eid, so just the name by itself without eid won't work. Maybe the other possibility is v'olim dekasav eid v'diat inan baha chasima talav Yaakofu. And I will say, what's the case? The case is where he did write eid, but ultimately, again, we know that this is not the signature of Yaakov, but rather we know that ultimately it's a signature of his son. That's the problem over here, that it's from the document itself, we know that it's not Yaakov's signature. Top of Pei Zayin, v'dilma b'shma davu achasim. Maybe halacha l'maaseh means that he's signing in his father's name. Lo shavek in shmei v'chasim shmei davua. A son is not going to go ahead and leave aside his own name and sign the name of his father. V'dilma simna shavye. Both say Pei Zayin base 3 lines down. Maybe he made his father's signature into a siman. Rav Tzayer Kura, Rav Chanina Charusa, Rav Chista Samech, Rav Hoshia Ayin. Also, we see multiple examples of people who didn't sign with actual signatures, but rather, again, signed with symbols. For example, we saw this before. Rav used to sign a fish. That was his signature. Right? Rav Chanina, a palm tree. Rav Chista, a samech. Rav Hoshia, an ayin. Rav Barafuna, Tzayer Makusa, a mast of a ship. To which the Gemara says, Lo chatzif inish l'shavuyi l'shwa davu asimna. Ultimately, again, a son is not going to make his father's signature into a siman. Right? He's not going to relegate his father's signature into a siman. I v'lis kasher hai b'shnei edim ivrim v'lis kasher hai b'shnei edim yivanim. But I don't understand, why do we have to get into all of this, I will say? Why can't, remember, I will say, here's what we're focused on over here. Right? In the case of, right, 2 Gittin side by side, and in case number 1 in the Mishnah, where you have 2 Hebrew witnesses, 2 Greek witnesses. The Mishnah paskind, right side get is kasher, which makes sense. Why is right side get kasher? Why? It has the 2 Hebrew witnesses right there. Left side get is going to be pasul. Why? Why, the Gemara says, why can't we just simply say, V'lis kasher hai b'shnei edim ivrim, v'lis kasher hai b'shnei edim yivanim? Why can't right side get be kasher because of the 2 Hebrew witnesses, which it is, and why can't left side get simply be kasher with what? With 2 Greek witnesses. In other words, I will say, in the first stage of this Mishnah, we're trying to figure out how could we validate the left side get essentially by utilizing the names of the second name in the Greek signature. Remember, I will say, what's the second name in the Greek signature? What's the second name? That's the name of the actual witness himself. So trying to figure out a way, how could we just validate it using that? And because we know it's not the signature of the father. It looks like it's the signature of the father, but it's not the signature of the father. Maybe he's using his father's name as a symbol. Why do you have to get into all of that? Why can't we just simply validate left-hand get through Greek signatures? Through Greek signatures. After all, we learned this nan. We'll say actually the next Mishnah. Get shekasvu ivris ve'edav yevanis. If you have a get that was written in Hebrew, but you have Greek witnesses who signed, yevanis ve'edav ivris, or it's written in Greek, and you have Hebrew witnesses who signed, kasher. Ultimately, it works. And we'll say, so why are we getting all worked up about this? Why can't left-hand get simply be validated, I will say, through signatures 3 and 4 on the document, which are Greek signatures? In other words, a Greek signature, which again I will say one more time, is a signature written in Hebrew. Just the difference is the Greeks would put their father's name first before their own name. That is a valid signature for Gittin purposes. So why not just validate left side get with signatures 3 and 4, which are Greek signatures? Or maybe you say, no, here's the problem. I will say, what's the problem with validating left get with signatures 3 and 4? What's the problem? You have space between the document and the signatures of the witnesses. And I will say, that is not a good thing. right, to have space. Anytime you have space in between a document as signatures, never good, because Lamaisa, again, that leaves room for all kinds of potential forgeries or just inappropriateness with the document. Varachizkia, Malu Bikrovim Kasher. So Chizkiah says, I will say in general, whenever you have empty space in a get, you can fill up that empty space with whatever you want, even with the signatures of relatives. The idea is we just don't want dead space. Hat Tani Ziri, Shnei Ksherim. So the Gemara says, so Ziri says, that's true ultimately again when the Maisa both are Ksherim. So what's the problem over here? To which the Gemara says, Tana Didan, Dilma, Gundalis Chasim, V'kulhu Echad Hu Dechasimi. So we'll say, okay, so now the Gemara says, you're right, what's the problem over here? We'll say, so this is a problem of good old Gundalis, right? What's Gundalis? So we'll say, take a look at Rashi for just a moment. You see Rashi's Dilma Gundalis Chasam. It's a little bit further down in the Gemara. So Gundalis Chasam, B'hai Yevanim Cheshinan, Dilma Gundalis Chasam, Chad Pinayo Shema Yevani Harishon, Chasam Kisidra Ivri, Shechasam Lamala Himenu, Shmot Chila, V'achakach Shem Aviv, V'nimtza Shalasheni Hu Chasam, V'ivri, Sheni Roan Shalasheni Chasam, V'yavan Achron Chasam Kimin Hago. So I'll say, listen to this. Gundalis means I'll say that we are concerned about essentially confusion. Here's what we're concerned about in this case. See, I'll say, here's what we know. You got two documents side by side. We have 4 witnesses. The first 2 are Ivrim, the second 2 are Yevanim. What we're concerned about is after the first 2 Ivrim sign, and now the Yevanim are ready to sign. So we'll say, so remember again, how does your typical Greek Jew sign his document? How does he sign? Father and then son. Or we'll say, what we're concerned about is like this. Maybe the Yevanim are going to see that they're signing after Ivrim. So they're going to say to themselves, you know what? Literally, one in Greece, right in Rome. So they're going to say, you know what? We should really sign like the Ivrim also. And what are they going to end up doing? They're going to end up inverting their signatures the way we do it, putting their name first and the father's name second. Meanwhile, we're assuming that since they're Greek witnesses, they're putting their father's name first. So if it could turn out that what? It could turn a whole variety of different ways. So maybe Greek witness 1 ends up signing like a Hebrew, and maybe Greek witness 2 ends up signing like a Yevani. So it could turn out what you thought was 2 signatures on get 1 and 2 signatures on get 2 could really turn out to be 3 signatures on get 1, 1 signature on get 2, 4 signatures on get 1. So essentially the Gemara says is, once you have this hybrid situation of Hebrew witnesses and Greek witnesses, the only thing we know for sure is that get 1, which is the right hand get, has 2 signatures. Anything after that already opens it up itself for confusion, and therefore get number 2 will be possible. So remember again, the Mishnah then said, case number 2 was where you have 1 Hebrew witness, 1 Greek witness, 1 Hebrew witness, 1 Greek witness. For this kasher high the Mishnah said that's not good. For this kasher high be'ed echad ivri ve'ed echad yivani v'high be'ed echad ivri ve'ed echad yivani da'atnan eid echad ivri ve'ed echad yivani kasher. So I will say, so once again the Gemara asks, I don't understand, why should that be a problem to have 1 Hebrew witness, 1 Greek witness, 1 Hebrew witness? Just go ahead, let right get be kasher with the first 2 signatures, and get 2 be kasher with the second 2 signatures. The Gemara will say, same idea on a stama get. There's no problem with having 1 Hebrew witness and 1 Greek witness. So why is it problematic? I will say, to which the Gemara gives the same answer. Dilma gundalis chasam utlasa echad v'chad echad. I will say it's the same exact thing that we said before. What's the concern? Gundalis. So I will say the concern is that what's going to happen is, I will say it's an interesting thing about human nature and the need for conformity. So I will say, what are we concerned about? The Greek witness is going to see how his Hebrew counterpart is signing, and what is he going to do? He's going to switch his signature. So unbeknownst to us, he's actually signing like an Ivri, which then means, Rabbi said, that you could have a case, ultimately again, of where you don't have 2 signatures on one get, 2 signatures on another get, but rather you could have 3 on one or 4 on one, whatever the variation. Therefore, halacha l'maisa, that's not going to work. So therefore, I will say, bottom line, halacha l'maisa is 2 cases in the Mishnah, 2 side-by-side Gittin being written on the same piece of parchment. If you have a case of 2 Hebrew witnesses and then 2 Greek witnesses, right get will be kosher, left get will be pasul. If, however, again, you have it signed one Hebrew witness, one Greek witness, one Hebrew witness, one Greek witness, or any variation of that, halacha l'maaseh, it's not going to work. Why? We're concerned ultimately, again, because of gundulas. And gundulas, Rabbosai, means the concern that maybe, again, the Greek witnesses will also invert their signatures to fit in with the Hebrew witnesses, and it turns out that each get doesn't really have the coverage that you originally thought had. Rabbosai, we'll stop over here for today. Shkoyach. All right, Chevron Zoom, have a wonderful Shabbos, everyone. Good Shabbos, good Shabbos.